Well, you are joining us for the next instalment of the content collaboration between Property Tribes and our friends and partners at the property portfolio management software, Lendlord. And we are calling this collaboration Landlord Digital Lives. And the whole point of this themed content is to speak to landlords who have adopted digital tools and see how that has impacted on their landlord life and indeed the performance of their portfolio and running their business. And today I am very pleased to welcome Andy Mason, who is a big user of Lendlord, and it's great to have you along for this interview, Andy. I'd be interested to know, first of all, could you give us a little bit of your landlord backstory?
Yeah, so I've been a landlord for somewhere in the region of 15 years or so. I sort of became an accidental landlord, I guess, initially how it started. I went to work in Singapore and rented out my own house with the intention of going for 6 months, maybe 12, seeing what it looked like. And I never went back basically to that house. I came back to England, but not back to the house. Whilst I was in Singapore, it was quite tax efficient. So I ended up buying another property as everything seemed to be going so well. And from there, I've bought sort of on average, maybe one or so a year. Mm-hmm. My initial, it's a strange story because I lent out my first house, just let my own house. And to be honest, it was a complete disaster. Then we ended up with someone going in, they paid the first month's rent, never paid any more, took 9 months to evict them. But it didn't put me off. I sort of liked the idea, moved on to the next one, and that's been the only eviction so far, touch wood.
Very good. Well, it's interesting that you talk about that landlord pain, because obviously Property Tribes is all about helping educate landlords and helping them to go, operate in prevention mode rather than cure. And that segues very nicely with digital tools, in my opinion, because to my mind, and I'd love to hear your opinion, they do definitely help mitigate risk. And, in this, what I call this post-COVID-19 lockdowns, plural, environment, and, all the economic fallout, I think we've seen risks massively amplified. And I think we've also seen change massively amplified. And all of these things, that they're all, for landlords, they need to be aware of them, and they should really, take every opportunity to mitigate their risk. Would you agree that using digital tools actually helps that process?
It does, but I also think that what it also allows you to do, it takes away the administration. So It allows you to focus on mitigating those risks yourself. So being in contact with the tenant, making sure everything's okay. So in COVID, I contacted all of my tenants just to let them know, see how things were, if they had any issues, if they were going to lose their job, whether, I could help them with their universal credit application, etc. And that ordinarily would take a lot of time up, which it does. But I think having a digitized world means that rather than you having to chase up everything else on bits of paper and ring people up and try and keep on top of all the admin, digitalization allows you to free up the person side of the business as well. Because there's two elements to it, I always think. There's the administration side, which people underestimate how much time it's actually going to take. But also at the end of the day, it's a people business, and you're selling a service in effect. But you're providing homes for people, and that's how I look at it. So for me, from a risk perspective, I've got I had a lot of digitization anyway, but it was all in different places. So I had some Word documents, and I had some Outlook, and I had some calendar on my phone, and I had 3 different spreadsheets for managing different limited company properties, non-limited company properties, and bringing that all together meant that a lot of the noise went away, and I could actually focus on the people side of the business and making sure that, to me, that's minimized my risk massively. I haven't really had an issue with COVID. Everyone's paid, although some have paid in slightly different installments. But everyone knows that, I'm approachable and it's easy to come. They can come to me when they've got an issue. And so nothing's really, there's no issue you can't resolve if you're both honest on both sides of the equation, is the way I look at it.
Well, I 100% concur, Andy. And I think, we would never ever say that digital tools would replace that human interaction. As you so rightly say, property is a people business. It's all about communication, honest, transparent, open communication, providing a service. And all I think we say is that digital tools kind of, well, what you said, enhance the landlord's efficiency. And, data does help as well in terms of understanding your financial position. And I think it's absolutely vital that every landlord, does understand their financial position. Otherwise, it's like being on a ship at sea and you have no understanding where you are on the surface of the ocean or which direction you're heading. So I'm glad you mentioned the people aspect, because all we ever say is that digital tools, they will just enhance landlords' efficiency. And that is important. And as you say, it frees up time. But I guess, you mentioned you had bits and pieces all over the place, and that when you found Lendlord, it kind of curated it all onto one platform. And we hear that time and time again from the Lendlord users. But I'm sure on your landlord journey, you came across lots of different bits of tech. And we hear about new digital tools being released every week. I mean, I get them every week. What was it that attracted you to Lendlord?
There's a number of things. One thing I really liked was it was web-based. So I didn't have to have my laptop with me necessarily. I could look at things on the phone. I didn't have to, I had a problem with some of my online stuff before where I was using Dropbox. And then I moved onto a Surface Pro machine, which is a Microsoft machine, and Dropbox doesn't work on it. So you end up, then I'm like, oh God, okay, I've got to keep my old laptop. So with Lendlord, it was just all in the same place. It was the way it integrated everything together. So you had your financials, but you also had your little reminders about your gas safety certificates due. So you didn't have to have Outlook as well. I liked the way that I like the people, to be fair. The thing that really sold it on me, I've tried digitalization before with a couple of other platforms, and the experience has been okay to start with, but then it never improves. With Lendlord, I thought the tool was reasonably good to start with, but it was obviously a startup, sort of beta tool or whatever you want to call it. But the interaction coming from from the owners, from the chat, every time you asked for something, it wasn't oh yeah, it might be there in the future. It was okay, that's a good idea. There was an interaction. Other people have asked for it. There was workarounds suggested. So it always felt like the customer came first.
Lendlord was made for landlords by landlords. And I know that is a very overused cliche, but quite often I talk to people in the prop tech space, and that they're not landlords. They have a property related product. And sometimes I feel like I'm talking a different language to them. Being a landlord, you have to adhere to over, I think it's 180 different government statutes and regulations. Landlords almost have their own language now. And I think that's why Lendlord is so successful, because there are actual landlords with decades of experience actually behind it. They know where landlord pain is. And I think you've got to have that level of detailed knowledge to really create a product that is going to address those pain points that landlords feel. Yeah,
agreed. I work in technology anyway. So I work, sort of in technology for a financial services firm. And, the amount of times that people lose the focus on the client, whereas with Lendlord, it just feels like the core of everything is the end user.
Well, again, wonderful to hear. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. I think it is interesting that landlords have typically been resistant to change. Certainly, I believe that the entire property sector is resistant to change. And when Nick and I started Property Tribes in 2009, even then we were advocating using the digital tools that were around at the time. They were quite, basic and primitive. We even developed our own digital tool ourselves. And like we found a lot of landlords were very resistant to it. And I don't know, coming from a tech background yourself, is there any advice that you would give to landlords that are kind of just sitting on the fence thinking, oh, well, I've got my tried and tested ways. I'm not gonna take that jump to become a digital landlord?
I would say open up your eyes, you might learn something. If nothing else, you can move it on for some, it'll help you validate what you're doing. It's so easy to use. There's not a huge amount of effort required. And that's the great thing about it. There's not a huge amount of effort to set it up. The way I use it is I've just used it going forwards. I haven't tried to do a backward view at all. In my world, I've kept my old spreadsheets, but I just don't use them anymore. So I keep them for historic reasons in case, you ever need them. And what I haven't tried to do with Lendlord, which I'm sure some people would do, is I haven't tried to look back. I haven't said, well, I've got 10 years worth of data, I'm going to upload it and try and upload it. I've just said, let's just wipe the slate clean. Let's use this. Let's forget all my old processes and ways I did my Excel. Let's just start from, I went back to April because it's obviously new tax year, and let's just move forward and use Lendlord, and I've adjusted my world to meet the world of the tool. And I think the more you do that, you can then benefit from the power of the tool and not get stuck in your old sort of, well, I've always done it this way. The world is changing. And I think the tool is changing, and you can use it as much or as little as you want. If all you want to do is keep your P&L, and fine. If you want to analyze deals, absolutely fine. You don't need to put everything on it, but it's free. It does things that you maybe don't have in your current processes. Why wouldn't you use it? But my advice would be get on board and start to use it. See what you like, what you don't like, suggest changes, and just fit your world around Lendlord rather than the other way around.
No, I do agree. And I think, it's the educated, informed, and dare I say it, digital landlord that's probably going to weather the storm ahead, because we are remaining in uncharted waters, I'm quite sure, for some significant time. Yeah. We don't have a crystal ball, but using digital tools, I do say that they help mitigate risk. They can definitely help with the educational process as well. One of the things is the deal analyzer, which you kindly mentioned. That can be a great way to crunch the numbers on a deal. If you put the data in correctly, numbers never lie. They give really good insights. And then obviously, you mentioned your profit and loss. There's lots of prompt fields within the software that highlights things that you can actually, claim against as expense for tax, which some landlords might not be aware of. So yeah. I think, this whole concept of educating landlords and them working alongside that with digital tools, I see that as a way through the challenges ahead.
Make your life easier, especially if you're not a full-time landlord like myself, where you're working as well. At times when you're busy, and it's just having something that I can just nip on for 10 minutes and do a quick update, or just more for me, it's look on and just see, oh, that doesn't look quite right. I've obviously failed to input something, or maybe it's not inputted at all. So it just highlights where the gaps are, and I can just go in and fill them at my leisure. And it's just so much easier to do now. And it's, rather than have to go and fire the old laptop up, try and remember where the hell I stored those 5 different spreadsheets, etc. So.
Fantastic. Well, I guess, we are in a new year. many people over the Christmas and New Year period think about, improving their lot in life. Many people we know from Property Tribes data turning towards buy to let. It seems a safe haven for money during any challenging time, let alone these uncharted waters that we're in at the moment. And I think that the landlords starting out now with all the benefits of these digital tools, they're very fortunate, because when you and I started, they didn't really exist. So it does kind of help them professionalize their business from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can manage your own properties from the get-go now, which I used to use a letting agent, and then I used someone else who I had a very good relationship with, but they've quit the business now. So, so back last year, I decided to try and self-manage, and I've never looked back, to be fair. And I don't think I could have done that without this tool. So I think you can, not that I'm saying everyone should self-manage, but in my mind, this digitalization allows you to at least self-manage if you wish to. It gives you all the hints and tips, things like Property Tribes. You can ask as many dumb questions as you want, and I often do. But I think that just really helps you understand that the overall business then, and it stops you thinking of it. Too many people, in my mind, look at it as purely money and just say, it's going to go over there and it's going to give me a passive income. As you well know, there's no such thing as a passive income, really, in property. There's always going to be items to do and things to solve out. And as we said before, it's a people business. And I think the digitalization, something like Lendlord, just allows you to take more ownership of it yourself. That's what I'm going to try to do for this year.
Well, it's fascinating what you said there, Andy, because, Lendlord is primarily financial intel software for landlords, helps landlords identify capital raising opportunities and so on. But it's so lovely to hear from you that you almost use it as a property management tool as well. And, we've gradually kind of bolted on all these different modules to make it a complete ecosystem for landlords. But again, we've got these pink, anything in pink on Lendlord is an opportunity to save money or raise money. And I think little features like that, once you come to know them and then they pop up, you're like, oh yeah, and you want to go and have a look. So it's almost letting you know what you need to know before you actually need to know that you know it.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got all things like, the tenant details are all on there. So someone asked me today, I think I'm having a boiler issue, and they were, have you got the tenant contact details? And, I can just, oh yeah, hang on a second, jumped onto Lendlord, there it was. Whereas before I'd have been like scrolling through my contact list, going to go, oh, what did I put them in? Did I put them under the house name? Did I put them under the person's name? Is it a combination of the two, etc.? So I think it's like a CRM system for some people. It's also like a financial forecasting tool for other people. It's a P&L, working out your tax tool. And then, as you say, there's all the other things like, at the moment, I'm trying to get everything onto a 5-year fix, so I don't have any need for looking at new mortgages. But you go on there, it tells you what your mortgages are. It gives you a prediction of your house price. It gives you your loan to value. So when are applying for new mortgage, someone asks you, what's your current loan to value? It's all there. So it just makes life so much simpler. It's not just about, I like the fact that my P&L looks good, don't get me wrong, but it's so much more than that.
I think you're right. And it's definitely helping landlords to be more professional. And that is the way that is the direction of travel from the government and all the new regulatory and legislation changes that they're bringing in. So it does go very much hand in hand with professionalisation of the sector. And, you've got years of landlord experience, Andy. If you could give one tip to a landlord, it could be landlord with, 200 properties or one property starting out, what would be your kind of golden nugget tip for 2021 going forward?
Tough question. I think for a new landlord, I mean, I see a lot of if we start with the new landlord bit, I guess. So what I see on Property Tribes as well, and I see it on all these other things, the amount of people who are saying, oh, chasing the yield, you know, Liverpool's a great place to invest. Newcastle's a great place to invest, you know, whatever. My view would be invest local, first of all. Look for somewhere local, self-manage yourself when you're small, and start to understand the business. If it was that would be my top tip for a new starter. For someone who's got 200 properties, I would say get yourself on something like Lendlord, digitalization. Even if you use an agent, get yourself on there, because it will validate that what they're doing for you is in your best interests. Spend a bit of time. It's not hard to set up. Get yourself into some sort of digital world, and don't just leave the managing of your properties to somebody else, especially today. I had an issue, just on a bit of a side. I used to use an agent for doing deposits for me. It turned out the agent went bust and they hadn't lodged the deposits, even though all the tenants thought they had. And so obviously that put me in a bad situation. So, and I'd passed responsibility onto somebody else. But I would say, ultimately, you're responsible, and digitalization will give you that secondary check or second pair of eyes, whatever you want to call it, on top of the agent, and make sure they are managing your affairs in the way you want them managed.
That's a very good point. I'm just going to finish now, Andy, by saying that obviously once you get onto the Lendlord platform and within the ecosystem, there are many trusted providers of products and services for landlords. And one that's had a lot of really positive feedback is the Selena credit facility for property investors. And it's really interesting because I was on a forum the other day on Facebook, and this lady said that she had to joint venture because she didn't have sufficient funds to carry on building her portfolio. Even though she had a lot of equity in some properties, she couldn't access it for one reason or another. And of course, you know, if she'd known about the Selena product, she could have just continued on her own without having to involve joint venture partners. And I guess my final point is that actually using these digital tools, we've mentioned the educational aspect, but also, it is actually keeping things simple, and simple to my mind is always best, and keeping control, because the best person to have control over, you know, your properties, your tenants, your finances, is the person that you see in the mirror every morning. And I've learnt the hard way over my 19 odd years of landlord experience that, you know, I do have to take full responsibility for my portfolio and every aspect of it, and I do. But I think, you know, Lendlord could actually reduce a lot of pain for landlords going forwards.
Yep, agreed, completely.
Okay, fantastic. And any final words that you would like to close this out as we, talk about a landlord digital life?
Not specifically about digital, but I would just say, you know, from my perspective, everything is changing, and it's changing faster and faster every year. And so, you know, not being digitalized is going to become a bigger and bigger issue the longer you leave it. So get on to, it doesn't have to be Lendlord, get on to any sort of digitalization if you prefer, as fast as you can, because otherwise you're going to find it harder and harder to keep up, and B, eventually you'll get yourself in trouble if you're not careful.
Well, amen to that, Andy. I couldn't say it better myself. Thank you so much for being a contributor to our Landlord Digital Lives content collaboration with Lendlord. We've been promoting digital tools for landlords, and we just really want landlords to see what's out there and start using these tools. As you say, Lendlord, obviously we want you to use that, but there are other great non-conflicting tools out there as well that can make landlord life easier, many of them on Property Tribes. So thank you for being a star contributor, Andy, and for being a supporter and advocate of Lendlord as well.
Thanks for inviting me along.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we'll see everybody tomorrow on the next instalment of our Landlord Digital Lives. But for now, it's goodbye from Andy and myself. Thank you very much for watching.